So what I have for you today is one of my personal favorite things to talk about. And it's that period of time right at the beginning of the 90s when you could just feel the shift in popular music, especially hard rock. And it was when Nirvana hit. And just all of a sudden, bands that were filling up arenas 3 weeks ago now can't even get a gig in a nightclub. And these bands that looked like these homeless people, all of a sudden they're filling up arenas. It was so crazy. And I remember, I've told this story before, but I know I'm not the only one that had this experience. I know because I've talked to so many people over the years that had this same thing or something similar. And it was September of 1991, and I'm back in school, and I'm working at a convenience store. And it was probably, I don't know, it was late in the evening. It was probably around 10 o'clock. And it was September, October. It was somewhere in there. I was just back to school after summer, and I'm working at this convenience store and there's nobody there. We're getting ready to close up, and we always had this little radio on back behind the register. And I don't know, I'm just kind of cleaning up and getting ready to lock up, hoping nobody else comes walking through the door so I can clean and get out of there on time. And while I'm there, all of a sudden, out of the radio comes that, the beginning of Smells Like Teen Spirit. And it was one of the most otherworldly experiences I've ever had. I heard that and I stopped. I really did. I mean, I remember this moment. I heard it and I was just stuck, and I had to listen and hoping nobody would come walking into the store because I wanted to hear this, and then all of a sudden when David Grohl just starts pounding into those drums, and then Kurt Cobain, instead of having this shrill tenor voice that all the heavy metal bands are trying to do, he's just, get out your guns, he's just kind of whining almost. And then when the chorus comes, he just starts this screaming, and it was like, and I just remember just the power of that guitar and the drums and the whole thing. And in that 3.5, 4 minutes, however long that song is, I had that experience that I think so much of the rest of the world had, where I kind of, by the time that song was over, I thought to myself, I think that all the music I listen to stinks. And by the next day, I'm buying everything that was coming out of Seattle. I mean, I bought Alice in Chains almost immediately. I started buying Soundgarden stuff. And just going down the list, Pearl Jam. You remember all the bands, and I just got just totally enveloped in this stuff. I loved it so much, and I really, really loved Soundgarden. I got really into them. I just became fascinated with them. But again, it really that impact of that album, Nevermind, that song Smells Like Teen Spirit. There was something about that it woke something up in the culture, and it was this powerful moment of change. It was incredible. It was an incredible thing to live through, and just to put a fine point on the impact that it had, because still to this day, people. You'll see the Nirvana t-shirt all around the place, probably with people who don't even know what it is, but you'll see it. And as a matter of fact, I do a lot of traveling in Southeast Asia, and it's amazing. You'll just see Nirvana t-shirts all over the place. And you think, what in the world? Here we are 30 plus years after that album came out. And Kurt Cobain and that music is still resonating around the world. It's incredible. Anyway, for me, it was this moment of realization that things had gotten, because I was an 80s kid. I loved 80s hair bands and hair metal and glam rock and all that. I liked a lot of that stuff. I liked really heavy stuff too, but I was into all of that. And you could feel it by the time we got to the end of the 90s that we didn't see it until Nirvana hit, that it had gone too far, that it had become a parody of itself, that it was silly. And then Nirvana walked in and just kind of like slapped me across the face thinking, whoa, we've really gone gotten out of control here. It's time to bring everything back down. And I remember a guy I was working with in a studio, when he saw how much I was into Soundgarden, he says, you got to come listen to this. And he pulled out Sin's Good Man's Brother by Grand Funk. And you start realizing that what we were getting back to in the early 90s was a variation on what was happening in the early 70s. Just kind of maturing and kind of taking its own little path. It was such a cool time, such a cool, great time to be alive and to listen to music. So anyway, I didn't mean to spend so much time on that, but what I have for you here today is an article. This is literally a month after Nevermind comes out. That's the big Nirvana. It wasn't Nirvana's first album, but that was the one that we're talking about here. And it's this little article that just kind of explains Nirvana, the band, and then right below it, there's a review of the record. And I don't know, people that are watching this, I'm assuming that you understand what I'm talking about and maybe were even part of it or lived through this. Well, obviously you probably would have lived through it. But there's mixed feelings about that moment in time when Nirvana hit and everything changed. I remember seeing Great White in concert a few years later, and he's like, we're going to bring heavy metal back kicking and screaming, like, and there was something to this idea that we lost the party nature of the 80s and whatever. But the point was there was a lot of people that didn't like the big change that took place, that didn't like this new music and the new sound and the grunge idea. And I loved it personally. But this article explains it a little bit, and then it gives a review of the album Nevermind, which again, this is October 25th of 1991. The album Nevermind was released on September 24th of 1991. So this is just a month later. And so that puts this in context. And even if you don't like Nirvana, you'll be able to resonate with all this stuff because we all lived through it. And it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Okay. Nirvana, the title is Nirvana Sells Out the Paramount. Okay, once it was commonplace that more than 200 rock music starved people would stuff themselves into a 5-person apartment at the Evergreen State College's K-Dorm just to hear Nirvana. The building swayed and the sheetrock weakened underneath songs like Scoff and Paper Cuts, but it was really tortured when the bassist, Chris Novoselic, began to play the first few notes of their cover hit Love Buzz. But that was 2 years ago, and since those punk rock golden days, the band originally from Aberdeen has changed. No doubt some of those same people who crowded into the Evergreen dorm will be heading up to the band's sold-out concert at the Paramount Theater in Seattle Halloween night. Since those early days, Novoselic and singer-guitarist Kurt Cobain dumped their original record label, Sub Pop. And if you're familiar with all this stuff, you know about Sub Pop Records. That was that kind of indie label that was up in Seattle, up in the Northwest when all this stuff was happening. Added drummer Dave Grohl. And so, by the way, interestingly, Nevermind was Dave Grohl's first album with Nirvana. I mean, and talk about knocking it out of the park. Signed with the massive David Geffen Company, and their concerts now cost money. Olympians might worry about losing their exclusive musical avenue to Nirvana, but Novoselic thinks worrying is a waste of time. Sure, we're still going to play parties. Those are the best shows. Drinking beer, having friends around, playing with all those bands, Helltrout or whoever. As long as there's oxygen circulation, no problemo, Novoselic said. Still, a raucous punk rock band garnering loads of exposure, a major label contract, and consistently playing bigger and bigger places is almost unheard of in the corporate rock scene. And it was. I mean, this, again, as I said earlier, it kind of came out of nowhere. No one was expecting what happened. Though their popularity is growing, their Smells Like Teen Spirit video occasionally crops up on MTV. They still can give the fans their personal charm. Quote, it depends on the crowd, but last night in Washington, D.C., we played the same type of club we always play, Novoselic said. It was so packed and sold out, it was like playing in a sauna. Nirvana does not address a predictable political agenda. But Novoselic said, now this is the part that I want you to listen to, because this is the part that goes back to what I was talking about a second ago. But Novoselic said he hopes their music can break kids from the bond of thoughtless corporate heavy metal humdrum. And that's exactly what it did. That's what it did to me, for sure. And I know it did it to a lot of people, because I've had this conversation so many times with people that lived and went through that same thing. To Nirvana, music isn't a beer commercial where models shake their bodies to Muzak songs from the 60s. Rock, punk rock especially, symbolizes rebellion and change, not necessarily sales. But exposure from MTV, mainstream radio stations, and other sources helps them attract a broader range of people, mostly kids. Quote, it's kind of neat. Maybe we can say something that will rub off on some kid. It's better than singing Cherry Pie or Party Every Night, he said. Success hasn't changed their personal lives. They still wear the same clothes, drive the same cars, and eat the same food as they always have. They have yet to purchase Cadillacs, wear a single sequin glove, or play while wearing platform shoes and spitting fire. Boy, there's some knocks on some actual bands in these last few paragraphs, aren't there? Okay, quote, after we got however much it was that we did get from their contract with DGC, David Geffen Company, 33% of it immediately went to taxes. 15% went to our manager. Sub Pop got their chunk, Novoselic said. We just set enough aside so we get some money every month. If you worked steady at Jack in the Box 40 hours a week, you'd probably get the kind of money we get. But we don't have to work at Jack in the Box. What else am I going to do? I used to be a music freak carrying around a boombox wherever I went. I like the songs we play and I like the people's reactions. I get off on them, he said. Things are just happening right now. They've always got bigger and better. But if it was gone, I'd miss it. I'd probably find somebody else to do it with, but it wouldn't be the same. And that's the end of the art. That's the end of the first article. And it's interesting listening to this because, again, this is a month after Nevermind is released. We're not even close to the Herculean impact that they would have on the planet in the coming couple of years, where everything would change. I mean, it really was massive. And Chris Novoselic, he's a pretty cool guy. He's interesting to listen to. And anyways, okay, so now I'm gonna read you this review. This is a review of Nevermind, and it's kind of if you liked this stuff at the time, it's interesting to listen to this. Okay. Newest Nirvana gets listeners there. Nirvana, the mega punk pop trio of Kurt Cobain, Chris Novoselic, and Dave Grohl, released Nevermind, their second full-length album, last month, and there is no reason to buy anything else. What does Nirvana sound like? Imagine if 70s pop megastar Peter Frampton spent his formative years in Aberdeen, Washington, and his psychiatrist prescribed a heavy diet of Black Sabbath and lithium. Maybe then the sound would surface. Writing musical wakes for Love Lost, Cobain's rantings are filled with saintly hysteria. Quote, he's the one who likes all the pretty songs, and he likes to sing along, and he likes to shoot his gun, but he don't know what it means. You've recognized that song. That's off of Nevermind. Whatever that means. Confusion mixed with urgency is what rock and roll is about, and Cobain certainly wavers. Despite the general confusion that permeates the music, Novoselic's bass lines keep the listeners pert. Somehow, Novoselic relates his happy-go-lucky, sophisticated rascal wrapped in a lanky man's body personality through his bass. And it's interesting because when you listen to that album, the bass line in all those songs is so essential. It plays a really big deal. I mean, in Smells Like Teen Spirit alone, bum 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 bum, and then Kurt Cobain's playing his guitar over the top of it. But Novoselic's bass is a big deal in this album. Grohl, the band's fifth drummer, pounds the drums like he really hates them. which gives the band its driving force. And if you didn't know, David Grohl, of course, after Kurt Cobain offed himself and then Nirvana dissipated, went off and started the band the Foo Fighters. And he then became the guitarist and lead singer for the Foo Fighters, which then became one of the biggest bands in the world again. So he had the distinct whatever of being the drummer of one of the biggest bands in the world and then becoming the guitarist and singer for one of the biggest bands in the world, and it's two different bands. Produced by Butch Vig and Nirvana. And by the way, if you don't know who Butch Vig is, the band Garbage from the 90s, if you remember them, they did the song Stupid Girl and I'm Only Happy When It Rains. Butch Vig was the drummer for that band. And it wasn't like he was just a drummer. He'd been producing kind of alternative music for a long time. And then he was asked to come in and produce Nevermind. And of course, that became what it was. Let's see here. Produced by Butch Vig and Nirvana, Nevermind sounds slick. The way the music bounces and bursts from stereo speakers, it's hard not to jump up and down. Some might say that the album is so good, so slick, that it's bad, but they are simply being duped by the coolness of reverse psychology. The video for Smells Like Teen Spirit has already appeared on MTV, and if Geffen's promotional barrage actually works, Nirvana could infect the entire population. Once the population attains Nirvana, they may never return to the daily radio droll. Again, and this is why and that's the end of the article. That's why I wanted to read this. Because here they were a month in, and even the people writing this article could get it. They could see it. They could feel it. And I think, and I had that experience, and I'm actually curious how many people watching this video had the same experience. And there's probably people watching this video that did not have that same experience and hated the grunge movement and all the stuff that came in. I was one of those that heard it, and all of a sudden I thought, this is it. We need this. It was just this wonderful change that we needed in the culture and in the music. And it was so great. But I'd love to get your feedback on it. What you thought of that experience, and did it have the same kind of impact on you that it did on me and it had on others, or were you somebody that just didn't resonate that same way? I'd really love to get your feedback on that. Of course, please follow the channel, like the video, love to get your feedback, like I said a second ago, and of course, and leave your comments, of course. And if you know anybody else that's interested in this stuff, please share the video with them. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.